So I've been teaching for about 8 years, and this is my 6th year here at Annalee High School. I'm currently teaching AVID 9, AP US History, and Ethnic Studies.
Before we begin, can someone please remind me what some of our norms are for listening, especially in this context? Civil discourse, what does that look like? What does it sound like?
I wanted to be a teacher because I really appreciate the opportunity to learn something new every day. I'm constantly learning. It's actually hard to turn off my brain sometimes. I feel like I learn a lot because I'm preparing for lessons, of course, and I like to keep myself up to date on current events because current events are very important to what I try to do in the classroom, which is, place those current events in historical context.
Group 1, you guys are going to go first. Please read the question out for us. Remember, not everybody had all of the questions, so we want to hear the question that you're responding to, and then we want to hear some of the ideas and concepts we could use in order to answer that question well.
But also I learn a lot from my students. Each class is different, and it's a new separate community. Since I have 5 different classes, it's like 5 little micro communities, and I love it. Global competence is actually gaining a lot of traction right now, and it's becoming more and more recognized as very important, for students to have when they leave the classroom and they go out into the real world. The gist of it is, what skills does a student need to have in order to participate in a global society? For example, do they need to be able to engage in civil discourse? Do they need to know how to practice empathy towards others? Do they need to know how to recognize multiple perspectives?
Global citizen, I think, is you're interested in other cultures and you respect other people from other places, from other countries, other races, other religions.
I believe that students actually have the capacity to care very much for other people. They have the capacity to show compassion and to practice empathy, to put themselves in someone else's shoes.
I think it's more just as I would listen to class discussions, I would kind of start thinking about, it was much more about, oh, how do I feel about this, or how would I connect this to other events, or how does this tie into this, and that type of stuff. And versus thinking of, oh, just this happened, I started thinking, why did this happen, or what contributes to it, or what came out of this.
So Miss Ambrose, one of the things that she always taught us was global citizenship. And I think before that, I knew that I was wanted to help the world and everything. But after her class, I've thought more about my future, and my future might not just be about, making money and having life for myself, but maybe, before that, going out and doing something to help other people that might not be as fortunate as I am.
For me, if I can get my students to care about other people, when they go out into the world, they are going to have the ability to connect on a human level that is becoming increasingly harder to do. I really want my students to have the capacity for human connection. I think it's crucial. Here's the beauty of global competence. You can do it in any classroom. It's a mindset, it's an outlook. So for example, in a science class, if you're learning about climate change, right, you could actually research, what are some of the injustices around climate change? Why are some countries experiencing it at a level that is not proportional to, whatever their contributions are towards it, right? Why is there such an imbalance? Because it's not a coincidence.
My favorite thing about the class, I would say, is that it just broadened my view of the world. Before the class, I was kind of a naive, sheltered kid that didn't really know anything that was happening outside of my own town. And this kind of brought me closer to people on the other side of the world. We did this one activity that was a website that you talked about certain, you were given a prompt and you wrote about it, and then kids from all over the world answer the same prompt, and you could have a conversation with them. I could see that other people around the world had the same views that I did and had the same ideas.
I think sometimes when you hear the word global, you're thinking you have to leave the United States in order to be, it's not about that. It doesn't necessarily have to be an international thing. It's not just about other countries. It's also about your local community and connecting to it. And really that compassion, that empathy element is really critical. If you look at some textbooks, especially US history textbooks, because I teach US history, I can show you examples where you have sort of like a sidebar or like a double page spread, and students will just flip right past that. It's like, you know, Puerto Ricans or, you know, Mexican Americans, and just boom, you know, flipping right through, and as if it's not important, right? So you need a textbook that really integrates the experiences of all Americans, you know, from all backgrounds. So if you are unlucky enough to have a textbook that doesn't do that, you, as a teacher, it's your responsibility to be culturally responsive to your students as much as possible. You need to get to know your students, what backgrounds they're coming from, and help them see themselves in the curriculum.
Last year, my parents told me if I wanted to come here to learn English, because maybe that could be a good idea and maybe provides me a good future. At first, but were difficult because I didn't know speak English, but Miss Ambrose told me a lot. She was one of the, she was the only one that helped me with my English. Like, she always gave me an assignment in Spanish and English, so I could understand more. And also I practice a lot with her, my English, so yeah.
I tend not to use textbooks very much. I like to use readings, articles, and there's a lot of wonderful resources out there, you know, online, obviously. Some of my favorites are like Rethinking Schools, Teaching Tolerance, and others. Teachers who struggle with this, it's about time, because it is time intensive. It means that you as a teacher need to take the time to educate yourself and then go out and get those resources. But your students will appreciate that so very much, and it will increase the engagement level of your students because they're going to feel connected to their own learning.
We did a lot of things on like current events. Like every month we'd write about a current event that's happening like some other place in the world.
It was always exciting. I was never bored to come to her class. It was always like my favorite class. And it wasn't lectures and just notes, it was games and like interactive learning. I would retain the information better because it was done in a very unorthodox way compared to the other teachers.
I would say my favorite project that I worked on, we did a really cool game. We like designed our own like board game for history, and it had like trivia questions with like different history concepts on it, and if you answered them you get like points. And so like I thought that was really cool and like an interesting way of kind of changing the way that we're learning.
I think mostly the group ones, the group assignments where we can talk and share, because then we can see what other people think, and that can increase your view about something.
My parents loved having like me in Miss Ambrose's class. Like they really enjoyed what I was learning and everything like that, because I would come home and I'd join their conversations about like things that were happening around the world.
So I think a lot of that came from our in-class discussions. I know that we very frequently would just have, not necessarily debates, but just discuss these topics in class, and people would just give there would be a lot of contribution. It was very almost kind of seminar based at some point, so like everyone in the classroom would be contributing to this conversation, and it didn't just feel like it was her speaking to us about what happened. It was us discussing with different things that we'd found and seen through the textbook and learned online and all of that. And I think that also incorporating like outside sources, and I think that just that whole combination allowed for a very like multifaceted point of view.
I think it's really important, as much as possible, to bring the community into the classroom and to get the kids out of the classroom and into the community. Some of the ways in which I do that are, we do a guest speaker sort of lecture series at the public library here in town, which is a 10-minute walk from our campus. And what we do is we invite, in my ethnic studies class, we invite people from a variety of backgrounds, usually who work for nonprofit organizations. Last year we had the president of the Santa Rosa Islamic Society come in and speak about what it's like to be a Muslim in Sonoma County, which was fascinating. We are trying to get a variety of backgrounds because I want my students to be able to hear from people's personal experiences. One of my most successful projects was one in which we bridged what I call the generation gap, right? So one of the things we did last year was we interviewed senior citizens in our community. I matched one senior citizen per student. Everybody had their own person, and they interviewed them using the StoryCorps app, which is free. And then they uploaded their interview to the Library of Congress. It was awesome because I basically had kids say things like, "Oh my God, he was like alive. he fought in World War II. This person was experiencing discrimination like before the civil rights movement and during and after, and they were hearing these very personal stories of people living in their community. It was amazing. How do you reach every student? For me, I want all of my students to believe very strongly that what they have to say is important, that they have a voice and that they should participate, they should contribute, that they are a part of something bigger, they're a part of this class. That is not so easy to do because in some cases, especially in high school, you're dealing with students who may have convinced themselves that they're not good at doing school. They may suffer from anxiety and they may really struggle with participating in classroom discussions. And so sometimes it might mean having other ways that you can bring in, those quieter students. How you do that? First of all, day one, come up with some kind of activity. In my case, it's something that you might even see in an elementary school. One of them is the t-shirt. My students, the first week of school create t-shirts and they use these t-shirts to introduce themselves to their peers in class. And the t-shirts stay in the classroom all year long. They hang on the little clothesline all year long as a reminder that each and every one of my students has a place here, right? It's a visual reminder and it's really important. I want, even if I have a student add later on, I make them make a t-shirt, even if they miss the first day of school or whatever. Everybody has a t-shirt. This is our class and we are our own little community, right? So what we're gonna do is we're going to generate those questions in small groups. Sometimes, especially for students who are afraid to speak up in class, it's easier for them to do that in a smaller group. So when we do small groups, I make it an expectation that each student in that small group contributes. I would hope that the more questions you ask, the more that you'll think of, right? Because someone might ask something that makes you think of something that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise, okay? So that's why we're doing this in small groups, because just like our monster, right? None of us is as smart as all of us together, okay? One trick to do that is, if you have someone who's the scribe, you pass on the pen halfway through to someone else in the group. Another good trick is to have a role in the group called the harmonizer. We could have some roles in the group. For example, it might be nice to have someone in the group who is the harmonizer, and their job is to make sure that everyone's voice is being heard. That's all they have to do, right? And maybe also help us follow the rules. And the reason I like this is because, this is a microcosm of society here in my classroom. That's what we're doing. This is, we're practicing being in the world. And so watching my students do that is very gratifying for me. And it's a great way to get my students to feel, all of my students to feel that their voice matters. Today I'm going to be introducing something new. So they have never done anything like this before. It's called a QFT. And that stands for Question Formulation Technique. And it comes from a book called Make Just One Change that's geared at teachers. And the idea behind that book is that students are not taught how to ask their own questions. When you look at an elementary school classroom, you can't get kids to shut up. They're raising their hand constantly, asking questions. That's inquiry, right? That's intellectual curiosity. And somewhere along the way, by the time they get to me in high school, whatever that natural curiosity is, it's been squashed. And so today we're going to be practicing this technique. I would like to know what your questions are. So that's what we're going to be doing today, okay? We're not throwing these out per se, but we're going to generate questions from you, okay? They're not going to be the same as questions from any other class. What I am hoping is that students will learn something from the process itself and that they will feel a sense of agency and sort of control a little bit over their own learning.
Instead of just having the teacher tell me something, I'd be kind of more curious as to why, and I'd care more about the things that I'm doing, because the things I'm doing for a specific reason. It's not just learning something because it's a requirement. I'm learning something because it's something that's going to better me and that I should know in the future.
One of the hardest things about teaching, there are many, many difficult things, is that you have to be okay with failing. You're going to screw up. There's no way. You are delivering lessons on a daily basis for, day in, day out. You're going to have days that are not going to go so well, right? You're going to have lessons that are just going to flop, and that's okay.
One of the reasons why people don't do things is fear of failure, right? It's not fun, right? So often we don't try new things as a result, right? But the beauty of trying new things is that's how you learn, right? So, Ms. Ambrose, modeling vulnerability for you, I'm already thinking about things that we could have done differently to make this better. I want them to feel like they have the ability to take action, and that what they say and do matters. Even the smallest acts, even the smallest sentences, everything matters.
What was unique about Miss Ambrose is that she really was a good teacher, but she also addressed us as people.
But she always is kind with us and let us express our thoughts.
Every day, Ms. Ambrose comes to class with dedication and a motivation to just teach. And she has so much passion for what she teaches about that you can't help but feel passionate about it as well.
I am hopeful for the future. I spend my time with teenagers all day long, and they are amazing, and they're going to do great things. And I want to make sure that they have the skill set that they need in order to do that.